Welcome to Taste Buds. I'm Debra Eckerling, goal strategist, writer, and foodie. And today I'm speaking with Dianne Jacob, author of Will Write for Food. She also teaches and coaches food writers, and Dianne also has an awesome newsletter. So, welcome, Dianne. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Deborah. I'm happy to be here.
So, food, we love it. So, where did that love of food come from for you?
Um, for me, it came from my parents. They were very adventurous eaters. My parents were Iraqi Jews from China, Orthodox Iraqi Jews from China. So I grew up eating Chinese food, Shanghainese food, Japanese food. I'm not sure why about that one, but we ate a lot of it. And Iraqi Jewish food, and my ancestors came from Iraq through India to Shanghai. So I also ate a lot of Bombay, Baghdadi Jewish food.
That's a combination we don't really hear so much about.
Correct.
So, can you tell me more?
Sure. Okay, so Iraqi food there's a lot of stews, a lot of with vegetables, a lot of stuffed things, like other Arab food. Baghdadi, Bombay food is spicy, like Indian food. I ate a lot of curries growing up and chutney, mango pickle, that kind of thing. Achar, which is an Indian pickle, which became an Iraqi pickle. I don't really understand what categorizes Shanghainese food, but there are certain dishes that are. I was just talking with some friends who were going to eat beggar's chicken at a restaurant, and you have to order it 24 hours in advance, and it's cooked in lotus leaves and clay. And it reminded me that my father always told me his favorite dish was a pigeon dish that was stuffed with rice and then wrapped in lotus leaves and baked in clay. So that's probably a Shanghainese dish then, the beggar's chicken.
How did you translate all of this adventurous eating into a career helping champions of food, basically?
Well, I got a journalism degree in my 20s, and I started writing for newspapers, and then I became a magazine editor and then a book editor. And so one of my early jobs was to be the editor of a city restaurant magazine. And because my parents were Orthodox Jews, we didn't really eat outside the house unless they made an exception for Chinese food. So I didn't really know anything about other people's food, but I had this job, so I probably wasn't very good at it. Um, and then I started reviewing restaurants on the side after that. And then when I became self-employed in the 90s, I thought about, well, what is it that I want to write about as a self-employed person? And the answer was food, because for my parents, since 95% of American Jews are Ashkenazi, they had a very hard time with their identity in the context of being Jewish. And so they cooked to identify themselves and to remember who they were. And that was very important to them. My father made all the pickles and the labna, and my mother did all the cooking and the baking. And they had a garden. My father grew Chinese vegetables, and I went to Chinatown all the time. So, and Japantown. So they were very wrapped up in their past, and food was how they expressed it. They made that food because they wanted to eat it. And um, as kids, we weren't really encouraged to have opinions about it. So I just loved everything. And I think that served me well.
And I'm guessing the served me well, the pun probably wasn't intended, but it works really great in this conversation. So thank you for that, regardless. So you've been food writing for a while, and a lot well, we know a lot has changed because when you started food writing, it was before the internet had like
Oh,
everything.
yeah.
So,
Hmm.
how has it changed? I guess let's start for the better.
Well, I think what's best about it is that anyone can go online and start. Before there were a lot of gatekeepers. I mean, there still are gatekeepers in print, uh, but there aren't as many gatekeepers online. So anyone can start a blog, anyone can start an Instagram, anyone can start a Substack newsletter, and um, hopefully you'll buy my book and learn how to write recipes, and you're off. You know.
And it sounds simple. Well, so I do goal strategy and food writing and food podcasting, so I get to kind of merge everything together. But it's like really simple. If you love food, there are places to write about it and share that love.
Absolutely, lots. I mean, typically you're gonna start on your own platform representing yourself, because if you want to write for Bon Appetit online, then you probably need to be a journalist or have a very successful blog or something. You can't just start there because there are gatekeepers there, but you can start by yourself.
And then what? How do you elevate beyond just writing for I guess the people who know you love food and want to learn about it?
Well, what I find about the expression, I love food, is that it's impossibly broad and people get too lost in the complexity of I love food because it could be about popsicles and it could be about the Feast of the Seven Fishes on Christmas Eve. So it would be better if you picked something. Um, I always say that in writing, you should pick something that's narrow and deep versus something that's wide and narrow. And I love food is in kind of in the I love is in the wide and narrow category.
Yes, I that makes complete sense. So, do you have a good example of the narrow and deep?
Well, I can use myself as an example. I started teaching food writing, then I started a blog about food writing. I had a newsletter about food writing. I gave talks about food writing. I became the co-author of 2 cookbooks. Um, I wrote a book about food writing in 2005, and it's now in its 4th edition, 2021. And now I have a free newsletter about food writing, and I never run out of topics. I interview all kinds of people, and I could be writing about AI. I could be writing about the technical specifics of recipe writing. I could be interviewing an agent or a publisher. So, I mean, even though I'm not talking about a food blog where, I'm only writing about curry, for example. Um, my topic is narrow and deep, if that makes sense.
Oh, complete sense. And so for me, so I am a very proud reformed non-cook. So I only started loving to cook about 6 years ago when I got an Instant Pot and realized cooking could be easy. And now I'm like the biggest advocate for cooking can be easy and can enhance your life. So this podcast, which grew out of my food writing for the Jewish Journal, it's bite-sized conversations about food, cooking, and community because I believe it's those things really go hand in hand. So
Absolutely.
uh, what is it about food that people feel such a strong connection to it?
Um, well, first of all, we have to eat at least 3 times a day. I think Americans probably eat a lot more than that, but but just from a survival standpoint, we do have to engage with food, and then you have to make decisions about it: what you like, what you don't like, what you perceive as healthy, what you perceive as indulgent, how much is too much. What do you make for other people? So there are a lot of decisions to make, um, and I think that because we have normalized outside food, like when I grew up, we went out like once a month, maybe for a meal. But now you can get takeout breakfast, takeout coffee, you can get a takeout sandwich. You can just keep going, and you can do that several times a week. And it's just how people eat now. So your standards are higher for what that food tastes like, as opposed to home cooking, which usually isn't quite as complicated or doesn't have as much fat or salt. And so um, I think there's more emphasis now on being a good cook because of the amount of time that we spend eating out with. I mean, even if you're just going to In-N-Out Burger, they've spent a lot of time figuring out how to make the absolutely most delicious burger possible. And that's what you have to compete with as a home cook.
Interesting. So, what are some of the things that you like to cook?
I love in the wintertime, it's right now, it's wintertime. I love to make soup. My poor husband, but I never get bored making a huge pot of soup and putting some in the freezer and discovering it. I mean, we can only eat it so long, and then I have to put the rest in the freezer because we're getting sick of it. But then I'll discover it, a month later and go, oh wow, here it is. I don't have to cook tonight. So I do. I love that. I love to make Middle Eastern food, and I love to make Asian food, and that's probably because of my background.
Nice. And soup is one of my favorites as well because it's easy. You put in ingredients and then you go do other things, but it's also that warmth factor.
Yes. And I like to in the winter, I don't like to eat salads as much as in the summer, so I like to get all my vegetables in by having soup.
It's a much it's I think more fun way to eat your vegetables as well.
I think so
Well,
too. Yeah.
do you remember your earliest food memory?
Um, yeah. I remember being a little girl and making a trade with another little girl on my street. I think her family were Scandinavian. She gave me a cookie, and I gave her a preserved Chinese olive, which is cured with licorice and salt and sugar. And her mother phoned my mother and asked, "Are you trying to kill my daughter? What is this thing?"
And what did she say?
I don't remember. I just remember that my mother was bewildered by this whole thing. Um,
And what did you think about what you got in trade?
it was fine. Another time she had a bowl of milk that had blueberries in it, and I thought, "Wow, your food is really boring."
It's What are some other tips you have for people to make their food at home less boring and more enticing?
Use more salt. If salt freaks out a lot of people, but I was a terrible cook for a long time because I had no idea how much salt to put in food. And in fact, even soups, I was a terrible soup maker. I used to say that my stock tasted like dishwater. um, but I have learned to use salt properly. And I really despise recipes that just say salt to taste because if you have never made this thing before, you really don't know how much salt should be in it, and you don't know what it's going to taste like. So that it's just not helpful. So a good recipe writer will tell you how much salt, and then if you want more, great. If you're watching your salt, use less, but at least there'll be a guideline.
Okay, so I was going to ask what is an important tip for recipe writers, and I guess that falls into that category
Oh
as well.
yes, definitely. I have a lot of arguments with people who went to culinary school because they were all taught to salt as you go, but that's not how you write recipes, generally speaking. It makes the recipe way too long. And if you just say taste it and adjust the seasoning, that is a meaningless statement because people have no idea how to adjust the seasoning. They don't even know what that means.
Got it. So you need to be precise in your measurements and let people figure it out from there.
Well, or if you're going to say taste and adjust the seasoning, you have to say it should be a little sharp and sour with a tiny bit of sweetness. I mean, so that they know what they're going for. You can't just say taste and adjust the seasoning.
So, would it be accurate to say then, when you are sharing a recipe, you want people to be able to taste it as you have it envisioned, and to do that, you need
Yes.
to be as specific as possible.
Yes, if you're trying to write recipes, you need to take ownership of the recipe. It's your recipe, it's the way you like it, and that's how you should present it. I mean, you do have to think about, well, who's your target audience and how much time is the home cook willing to put into this if that's who you're most of the time that's who you're targeting. So you have to be realistic. Um, but yes, you need to write your recipe the way that you would like it to turn out.
Got it. And any other quick tips on either cooking or writing better food articles or recipes or, you know,
A lot of people are obsessed with describing food. They want to use an endless number of adjectives, and that really doesn't add anything to your writing. It's better to tell a story and explain the food that way. Like, you probably have a better understanding of what I ate as a kid based on the story I just told you, not because I used, 20 adjectives in front of a noun.
I love that. Okay. Any final food for thought? What is something that you know now that you wish you knew when you first started cooking?
Um, well, I've been cooking for a long time, so I don't have to use recipes all the time, which is really freeing. I can pretty much approximate, how much of various things and which things go together. And my husband's always amazed that he can look in the fridge and not see anything, and then I'll produce a three-course meal. Because he's willing to help me, but he can't visualize it. I'm happy that I got to that point.
It's nice to be able to take ingredients and see them as meals. I remember when I first started having cooking goals. The first one was I'd love to learn to cook without a recipe, but I do realize that I needed to learn to cook with a recipe in order to you
Absolutely.
can't make the leap,
Yes,
right?
because you don't know, whether you should use 2 tablespoons of parsley or half a cup. How would you know if you're just starting out?
And so same question in terms of recipe writing. What is something you know now that you wish you knew back in the beginning?
As a recipe writer,
Yes.
I've gotten a lot better at streamlining recipes, to use fewer dishes and fewer ingredients and um, just to make them easier for people.
So it's really just trial and error, and what's better at trial and error than things that you get to eat?
Exactly. Well, assuming that your trials are very tasty.
Okay, good point. Is there ever a point where you just shouldn't eat something that you were experimenting with?
Oh, I've occasionally made things that have had to be thrown out, but not very often anymore. If you just keep going. I mean, COVID forced us all to cook a lot more, and if you
So
keep going, you understand ratios and flavor profiles and all that sort of thing.
is there a way to rescue a recipe if
Oh,
it's
sure.
okay? Is there like a rule of thumb for that?
No, I mean, depends what it is. I mean, if your soup is too salty, yeah, you just add more water to it. Sometimes you can add lemon instead of salt if you're watching your salt and you still want to have flavor. If it's tastes like dishwater, which was my problem a lot of the time, I just didn't. I mean, now I use better than bouillon as my base, and I can get the organic version, and there's lots of different flavors. It's fantastic stuff. So I can go down that path and have very flavorful dishes. So I'm not a snob or anything. That works for me.
I'm completely with you on the better than bouillon path. So the trick is use things that will help elevate your food, keep it simple, and keep going.
Fresh
Keep
herbs.
adding things.
Fresh herbs make a huge difference, I think. I always have them in my fridge. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dianne Jacob, for taking the time to share your food backstory and inspiration for cooking and writing about what it is you are cooking. Where can people learn more about you?
Well, my website is diannej.com, DIANNEJ.com, and my bio is on there, and all my old blog posts. Now for the past 2 years I've had a free Substack newsletter aimed at food writers. So if you just say I think it's just dianejacob.substack.com. I have written a book called Will Write for Food, which has more than you have ever wanted to know about how to get published, how to write recipes, how to shoot photos, how to write memoir, freelance articles, you name it. And I'm on Instagram at Dianne M. Jacob, DIANNEMJCOB.
Excellent. And we will have all of these links in the recap. And I thank you so much. And yes, I'm playing show and tell with your book. This
Thank
is one
you.
of these cases of I've been following Dianne for years, and I'm like, oh, let's just get her on the show. So it was really great to meet you. I thank you so much for joining me. And thank you for tuning in to Taste Buds with Deb. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe on YouTube and or your favorite podcast platform. And you can go to jewishjournal.com/podcast to read the articles that go with each episode and learn more at tastebudswithdeb.com. In the meantime, have fun either cooking, writing, all of the above. Until next time, bon appetit.